Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking around time tracking, and a lot of people I know, they think that this is a really negative thing, but it's not. You'd be amazed at the power of time tracking and how it can help you to grow your productivity. When we look at our time, we make a lot of assumptions about how long things take, and quite often that assumption is quite different than reality. You may have noticed I create videos for YouTube. Before I started time tracking, if you'd have come and said, Gary, how long does it take to create a video? I'd have said, it's about 5 hours. I then started tracking the time. And wow, I was absolutely gobsmacked. An average video takes me about 14 hours. Not 5, 14. That's nearly 3 times the amount that I thought. And how I came up with this is I tracked my time over a number of weeks. What I found is for each video, I would spend roughly 2 hours researching the topic, 2 hours writing and reviewing the script, another 1.5 hours filming the video, about 4 hours editing the video, creating social media content, creating any images that I need, about another hour, uploading the file to YouTube, they're quite big files, that was about another 2 hours, and then publishing the video and doing all the feedback associated with it, that was about another 1.5 hours. This is how I came up with 14 hours, and it did surprise me. And even now, my mind tells me it only takes me about 5 hours, because that's the time when I'm physically doing something. I'm not thinking about everything that goes around it. Having this data, it was helpful because it let me focus on what I was doing. It let me focus on how I was doing, and it let me look at how I can optimize my time to get some better use. So some examples of changes that I did. I used to film 1 video a day. So that's 1.5 hours for filming, of which half of that roughly was putting up and taking down the equipment. Change 1 I made. I now record 2 or 3 videos at a time. This means I've only got to use that setup and breakdown, that roughly 45 minutes, once for every 3 videos. I'm saving that time. So for 3 videos, instead of it taking me 4.5 hours over 3 weeks, it now meant that I had 1 3-hour session every 3 weeks. I'm not repeating that wasted time. I'm saving 1.5 hours over that 3 weeks. Doesn't sound like a lot, does it? Again, as part of looking at this, what I was finding is even when I was just doing 1 video, I would book out half a day in my calendar for doing that 1 video. Combining the 3 into 1 session, I'm still only booking out half a day. So I'm not saving that 1.5 hours. What I'm actually saving is 2 half days. Major win there. And that was just making 1 small change. When I looked at the editing time, 4 hours per video, that seems like a lot. Especially when some of my videos are only about 10 minutes by the time I've finished. I used to use an app on my iPad to edit the videos. Now, why I did that, at the time, my laptop, it was from 2012, donkey's years old. And the video editing software that I had for it just ran so slow, it was virtually unusable. That's why I switched. I used the iPad because I already had that, and the software wasn't that expensive to buy on the iPad. Last year, I was lucky. I was able to replace my laptop. I then went back to using the old laptop video editing software, and the time it took me to edit each video dropped from 4 hours down to 2. So that's a 2-hour saving per video. And that was because I was able to replace my hardware. It's amazing when you look at it, how the hardware and the software had such a big impact on what I was doing. So these, just a couple of examples from that limited amount of data that I got about doing videos. So how do I track my time? Well, I use a service called Toggl. It's a manual service, so I have to tick and say when I'm starting, and then I also have to manually go in when I've finished each task. So there's a little bit of extra work for you. It's not a lot. I mean, we're talking seconds, but you have to remember to do it. Toggle, it lets me track my work by client, by project, and even by task. And it's the task level stuff. That's where I get most of the interesting data from. So an example for a new video, which is a project. I've got the tasks: video research, video filming, video editing, video publishing, and video follow-up. So when I wanted to get some more details on this, well, I broke these tasks down into subtasks. So with the recording one, for example, I'd set that up into set up the studio, record the video, break down the studio. And this is where I was able to identify that half of that recording time was being taken up by the setup and the breakdown. Now, when you're tracking your time, be careful. Don't end up spending more time doing the tracking than you are doing the work. I've seen people do it. We want to get enough data that's useful, but not too much that becomes a burden. There are some tools you can install on your computer which will do that tracking for you automatically. They're running there in the background. Now, they're handy. I think they're quite useful. It means there's very little input for the tracking. What you do need to do, though, is at the end of each day, just classify which project each went into if the software isn't able to determine that for you. This, I only run for maybe a week at a time, or I run for a project at a time. I don't want to be tracking everything. I also want to be careful with what I'm tracking. I'm tracking it for me, so I don't really care. But if you're tracking your team's computers, just be careful. There's a lot of privacy issues around now. Make sure you're not stepping on their toes privacy-wise. So with this automatic software, it can detect when I'm running Microsoft Word, but not what project I'm on. I have to manually doing that. It can detect when I'm looking at websites, even down to the level of what the website is. Again, I may need to spread them out over the various projects. One of the interesting things that came from this, though, is it identified the amount of time I spent on social media. Again, if you'd have asked me, I'd have said, maybe 10, 15 minutes each day. When I summed it up with the tracking software, it was more like an hour. This gave me some really good information because I could identify not only that I was using so much time on social media, but the software showed me the times I was using it. I was able to set rules up in my firewall so that I couldn't access certain websites between 9 and 5. That stopped me going to them because if I would try, it would kick me out. It's a little thing, but it takes away you having to decide. That software does that for you. It stops you going to those websites when you should be doing work. I'm talking here then about how we analyze the data, because this is a key step. A lot of people, when they're tracking time, they track it. Yeah, well done there. They never stop and look at it. They never stop and analyze it. And this is really where the big benefit, this is where all these changes come from. It's from spending the time to analyze the data. And again, it doesn't have to take you too long. Most of these little changes I make, they're from spending 10 minutes looking at the data. What I do when I'm doing this is I look at each task, I look at what it's for, I look at the projects, and I ask myself, does the amount of time that I recorded map to what my brain is telling me? If it does, yep, all well and good. If it doesn't, I like to try and understand why it's different. It's in this understanding of the differences that helps you to make the changes. I ask, does the activity move me towards my monthly goals and my annual theme? Social media doesn't. It's interesting, it's nice, and sometimes it's handy just to take 10 minutes doing brain dead type stuff. But no, social media didn't. So that's why I was able to say, well, let's get rid of that. I ask, is there something else that I could have been using this time for? Again, with the social media, even if it was just 10 minutes spent looking at Facebook, that's 10 minutes I could have spent writing a script or doing some research. The final question, does this activity add to my life? Again, this is a bit of a hard question, isn't it? Because most things we do, they add to our life. But is it meaningful? Is it helping us? Because if it isn't, do we really need to do it? These questions, they're there to help me understand how each task impacts on my time. For those tasks where I feel that they don't, or where there's an issue, I say to myself, well, can I change the way I'm doing things? This is where, when I talked in my example about my recording time, I asked that question when I saw it was taking 1.5 hours to record. And what I came up with is I can combine them and save time by doing so. I did that and I ended up with 2 half days back. Big result, small change. I also asked, do I need to do this? Can I delegate it to someone else? Delegating, that's such a powerful tool which we don't use often enough. And here, one of the things I can definitely delegate is the editing. Editing is not something I need to do. I need to create the content, but I don't need to edit it. It's something that I can outsource. Now, with my videos at the moment, I don't make any money. So, to be honest, outsourcing anything for videos is a waste of time. But in the future, should I be earning enough from the videos to be able to cover the cost of an editor? I think that's money well spent because that's giving me back that editing time. 3 videos is 6 hours. So the 3 videos I do once every 3 weeks, I could get a full day's work back by outsourcing that. Remember, outsourcing costs money, which is why I still do it. So by delegating, I'm taking that work off my plate. I'm freeing my time so I can do more valuable work than I would be doing if I was performing that task. Is there something that I can get to help me with this? As I said again with my example, I was using my iPad. I was able last year to upgrade my PC. It gave me more power in the machine. I was able to go back and start using that more powerful software. So by upgrading the hardware, I was able to halve the time that editing takes me anyway. Gets me back 2 hours per video. So again, instead of it taking 2 days over 3 videos, it now only takes me 1. Another question that I asked, again, I know we've already talked about this. Can I stop doing the activity? I could stop doing social media. Now, I could do that 2 ways. The first one is self-control, just don't go onto them. The second one, which is the one I went for, I put a block so I can't actually physically do it. Is there something you can stop doing? Is there something you can block yourself from doing it? Look at that. Ask yourself this question. Some other questions that I asked myself. Well, why am I doing this? Is it because it's the way I've always done it? I've got to be honest, that's a statement I absolutely hate. Why do you do it? That's the way we've always done it. Red rag to a bull to me. You need to be constantly looking at why you're doing things and the way you're doing. Now, I don't mean every minute, I don't mean every day. It could be once a week, once a quarter. Just look at it regularly. Is there an easier way to do it that will help you claw back your time? Have you got something which feels complicated, which feels like it takes a lot of steps to do? Can you do that differently? Can you delegate parts of that? Again, don't feel that you've got to do everything yourself. So the summary of this, tracking time, it helps you to understand what you're doing. You can identify things that are adding value. You can identify things that you want to improve. You're able to make small changes and measure the use of your time to see if it's improving or not. You're able to understand what you're doing and also why you're doing it and make decisions based on that. You can identify those items that you can delegate. You can identify those items that you no longer need to do. You're able to focus on the value items that let you deliver the results you deserve. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Have you done some time tracking? Why not drop a comment down below? What did you find that you got from it? Please hit the thumbs up button. Every time you like, every time you comment, just helps with YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.